Oh, is that going to give me more energy? Not necessarily, but I actually like to know what's involved in this. Ah, ooh, no, go away. Will not let Lou in here.
Hi, Ben.
In a really friggin' long time.
I know. How are
I
you?
did not think someone like you would ever end up needing LinkedIn for something 20 something years after we. Oh, no, no, no. I take that back. Elementary school, kindergarten.
Um, fifth grade.
Oh, that's when you moved? Close enough. All right. So
How are
we'll get to the
you?
mushy high school stuff, but thank you for coming out today because this is honestly the second time that I've had the third time that I've had somebody going all the way back to childhood on the
Oh,
podcast. So we'll get to all of the good stuff, but just give me one moment. All right. We are recording. Okay. Hey guys, welcome back to Autism Experience Podcast. By the way, just so everybody knows, my guest today actually goes all the way back with me to 1998. We're talking elementary school. Somebody who I have a lot of history with, and I'm glad that she decided to come out today because this is someone I haven't spoken to in probably 25 years. So for everyone in my audience, this is Samantha Abrams. She graduated from the John Jay Cross River High School class of 2006. No, 2004.
hmm.
He, like many of my other peers, got to go to four-year college and will do a little catch up. But introduce yourself first and foremost. Tell us what you're doing right now and what you've been up to since school.
Whoa. That's a lot of things. Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Samantha Abrams. I am an artist and a transformational guide, an entrepreneur. Um,
If I remember correctly, didn't somebody have an organics shop?
yes, it wasn't a store, but basically, right out of college, I started a natural foods company um, called Emmy's Organics, which was a manufacturing company. So we had a product that we sold into stores, grocery stores nationwide. And I spent 14 years building that business. Well, 12 and then staying on for longer, and sold it in 2021.
2020. Okay, so you sold right in the middle of COVID. So where do you live nowadays?
I'm in Austin, Texas.
How the how you go from Ithaca all the way down to Austin? And if you tell me it's because of income, if you tell me because of taxes, I'm just gonna laugh.
It's not. Well, I just moved here. I was living in Los Angeles for the past 3 years. So I was in Ithaca for a long time, college, and then 14 years. And then I went to LA for 3 years. And then I just moved to Austin. It's a place that I've spent a lot of time. I have a lot of friends here. And I just really enjoy, there's like an ease here that is great. And so I'm living here now. So we'll see.
Interesting, because it's funny. For the better part, I went to WCC, so that took me 4 years, interestingly enough. You and most of, I think, our entire grade pretty much knew that I was in what we called. We can now talk about autism more openly. The one thing that I did not like about when you and I, especially, were growing up was even though at that time we had the American with Disabilities Act, you couldn't really have open conversations about autism. So sometimes, even though I loved our grade, I loved a lot of the people that we interacted with, took classes with at John Jay. Unfortunately, there were a few things that I didn't like about John Jay. And I'm going to argue that I think we had a terrific grounded education, but unfortunately, that John Jay education didn't necessarily serve me well when I went off to college, the way everybody else did, and then through the remainder of my life. There were a lot of things that I think you and I probably could find ourselves agreeing on that we could have learned when we were, going through John Jay, but we didn't. Like, I'll give you a good one. I'll give you a good example today. Personal finance.
Totally. I
I
think about
didn't
that.
mind the fact that we had to be sent off to college, but I kind of felt like as I got older, first and foremost, before we left the cocoon of John of Cross River, that was one of those things that even if our parents taught us, it was still something the school should have covered.
Yeah, but I also don't blame John Jay. I think that's just like the education system in general. Like, I don't think there are any schools that are teaching personal finance.
There actually, I encountered throughout my time working. So from 2004 to today, I've been either working part-time or full-time. I didn't get the traditional four-year college experience like you and everybody else. I'll actually no, I take that back. College took me 9 years, nine, almost 10 years altogether just to get 2 degrees. I just recently, if you refer over to LinkedIn later on, I just went back for a certification because now we're in a more technological based age. But back then, my argument with what we learned at John Jay is personal finance should have been covered. Yet I didn't learn it until 32 years old, finishing up my bachelor's degree when it was optional.
Yeah.
I didn't need to take it, but I felt like that would be one thing that would at least better help me understand credit, understand, things that were very difficult for me in my 20s, especially being on the spectrum. One of the big fun myths that most people don't realize is autistic people are not necessarily always good with money, but sometimes that just comes from our parents not feeling that, you know, comfortable with allowing us to live on our own. Like I remember in the 90s, my mom was so obsessed with, the identity, but that was typical of a boomer parent whose child, got diagnosed with autism. Today, where you can more openly discuss it, and guess who we can thank for that? The new college grads coming out of college.
Hmm.
This is the first generation that finally did something that I think most of our peers between you and me were a little uncomfortable talking about mental health.
Yeah, totally. And I think just any kind of neurodivergence or like any like I feel like there's such a huge spectrum now of like people who think differently, sense differently, have different types of gifts or challenges. Like there's a lot coming out around that. And I think that there's a lot of positive things that can.
Well, there was a lot of positive coming out of that. Like, for example, the fact that you have people like myself who you and most of our entire grade knew was a lot more high functional, but then even though educationally I had to take a lot of remedial classes, and the annoying part is probably, if I remember correctly, were you and everybody else doing APs our junior and senior year?
I did some. Yeah.
That was probably one of my biggest regrets, I think, was the fact that I wasn't smart enough to even end up in AP classes. But then if you look at our age group, look at the founder of Facebook, literally dropped out of college, dropped out of 1 year of Harvard and starts Meta,
Yeah.
which
My
still
ex-partner who I started my business with, we started it together. He got a GED and he didn't go to traditional college at all. And it's like one of the smartest people I know.
that's actually not a bad thing because I would honestly say, even though I thought high school played some relevance in our lives, do I really think do I really think college was needed? Honestly, nowadays with that whole debate, I really honestly don't think college was needed. But unfortunately, when we were growing up, that was to be expected because the idea of somebody taking a risk and starting a business was less than promising for people in John Jay. Like, I don't know where your parents were financially in their lives because I know a lot of our peers who we grew up with came from much better family, at least in my sake. My mother divorced my father when I was 5. He got remarried, had 2 more kids. He went through one extra divorce, three bad relationships, and now he's retired in West Virginia.
Mm.
Whereas me and my mom kind of bounced all over Katona. I lived in Dobbs Ferry for 5 years after 2009. Then I lived in DC for like almost a year with him. Then I lived in Elmsford for 10 years on my own. And now I'm in New Rochelle, which is getting much more developed, similar to New York City, which I'm sure you've read some of the stuff that's been going on over here, right?
Yeah.
They committed to a lot more affordable housing, even though a lot of the new construction is completely unaffordable to begin with. But I also know because you moved down to Austin, Texas, you could probably tell me it's catching up, right?
I mean, yeah, there's, I think, different neighborhoods for sure. Yeah.
Outside the university. Because the last time I was in Texas, I
Mm.
came to Austin in 2022 because my sister, who lives in Georgetown, just had gotten married that year. And don't get me wrong, Austin is nice, but if you asked me to live there, I don't know if I would. It's not about the pricing, it's about something my father had asked me to do in 2022. I didn't necessarily like doing, but this was outside of Austin because Austin is a much different vibe than the remainder of Texas, which is a very staunchly conservative state. I had to, for the sake of my sister's wedding from his second marriage that particular week, I couldn't talk about, how I grew up and autism and stuff like that. And in a place like the South, it's like, why do I want to keep this from people?
Yeah, totally.
I don't blame you for wanting to move down to Texas, for wanting to move down to Austin, because I'm sure it's probably great down there. But if you asked me to move down there, I wouldn't, only because I don't like the setup of the state where you need a car to go everywhere.
True. Yeah.
Like, how far is the closest Costco to you?
Oh, not that far actually, but not walking distance. I think it's like,
That's what I mean. Because as much as listen, I complain about New York in terms of expenses, but I will acknowledge one thing from when we both grew up here. It's one of the better states that at least invests in public transportation because the remainder of the country, even Texas, they don't do that.
mm, totally.
So, what ended up after Ithaca bringing you to go into business?
After college, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, so I met my now ex-husband, Ian, right after I graduated from college. And something that really brought us together was this love of healthy food. And he taught me how to make a recipe that he had developed before earlier, really out of a need for himself, because has a lot of, dietary restrictions. And so together we started making this recipe and just decided to start selling it locally in Ithaca, and then eventually like went down to New York City and to other places, and it really just kind of took off. I mean, I say took off, but it was like a 12-year overnight success. But I've always been super passionate about just health and wellness. I grew up as a dancer and
that
um,
part I do specifically remember. That
yeah.
was the one thing that I always knew you had other interests in different types of lifestyles, considering the amount of people that hung out with, and I still miss them to this day. But it's like I didn't have the luck or fortune to be able to get married because unfortunately when I mentioned to you in I was it comment or DM? I have a girlfriend now and we've been together for 5 months. She lives in the Bronx. I didn't meet her till literally my 39th birthday, but not all of that was exactly my fault because the other thing that you probably didn't realize is even though I was gifted, the opportunities for people on the autism spectrum are preferably we'd rather you go to college and study something that you're passionate about and then come out of school and look for employment in, but the employment options and the services around, people like myself, they're not that promising and the job prospects are not that great. Oh, and if you try to suggest that I want to be an entrepreneur, you get looked at.
Hmm.
because apparently people on the autism spectrum shouldn't necessarily do that, but we have autistic entrepreneurs. Bill Gates, I don't like him, but Elon Musk, but apparently it's okay because they come from a lot of money.
Hmm. Yeah,
Notice
that's
the contradiction?
deeply unfair. Yeah.
It's, and that's the one thing, because a lot of people ask me something interesting. They're like, you came from northern Westchester County, where a lot of people, and the assumption was you might find this interesting. When I mention Cross River, they're like, did you live in a mansion? I'm like, nope. Uh, Raised by a single mother, and we lived in public housing.
Yeah.
So that's exactly the look that everybody else from other communities actually gave me when I told them the truth, which is, well, unfortunately, my mother and father separated when I was 5 years old. So what do you think happens to the single child kid? You all knew that.
Yeah. We kind of have a similar story in that way because my parents also got divorced and my brother ended up moving in with my dad. And so it was just me and my mom, and we definitely struggled and moved around a lot.
I probably think I remember that, but I don't. But it's good that you reminded me about that because, besides autism, what the other annoying one was, you couldn't really discuss it, John Jay? Divorced parents.
True.
I mean, I loved the people we grew up around, but there's one huge gaping thing that I would say became a huge problem. Socially, how could you discuss, in your case or my case, oh yeah, by the way, our parents were divorced,
Hmm.
without getting a
Yeah.
mean look, without getting an interesting look from all the kids whose parents' marriages worked out.
Yeah. But also, I mean, yeah, I think even now we can talk about relationships in general in a way that we couldn't back then. So yeah, talking about divorce or even like a lot of people's parents, even though they were together, maybe didn't have super healthy relationships. So there could be stress at home from people fighting or just like holding
Well, there
tension.
was a lot of things I think we didn't probably know about all our friends, but I would say I ran into plenty, among the athletes crowd, I ran into my pretty big share of, quote, ignorant people. Like, for example, I just ditched a friend back in 2023 who, let's just say it was Rich Quinn. And if I look back on it now, I just outgrew that phase of my life as I got older. In fact, it wasn't until I met my girlfriend where I finally just realized something. Not so much the awakening part of it, but I finally just said to myself, if I tried to explain not only divorce to them, they wouldn't understand, but also, how can I explain that I haven't had the same opportunities as everybody else?
Yeah.
And the biggest thing when you're coming out of university is they don't want to realize this because this isn't about networking, but to the ones who stayed back in Cross River, when you're on LinkedIn probably because you're selling services, which is what most people utilize LinkedIn for. They're selling a service, or they're business owners, trying to meet similar people as I've done through this podcast. If
Hmm.
I tried to explain to my best friend whose father got him a job, Ricky Bolander, that the reason you guys think I'm wasting my time online is logically because guess what? In 2009, they sort of know this, but they didn't want to come to grips with it. What happens when you move out of that? You have to start networking from scratch. I think you knew that when you moved to Ithaca, that it was a completely different lifestyle. Not only completely different lifestyle up there, but would you say that you had to learn networking differently?
I would say that I didn't really know what the concept of networking was until I started a business, you know? Um, and I think that's something that I do kind of naturally, 'cause I like people. Um, So,
Well, they labeled it something differently. In college, you're right, because there's two different types of networking. There was going to the job fair back then, or going to family events, or, occasionally, friends' parties post college. And
Mhm.
then what you talk about business networking, that's the thing I think most people working a 9 to 5 don't necessarily understand. So if I don't have the same opportunities as them, and now we start to see that technology began evolving. LinkedIn began evolving, just like, whatever. What was your first social media? MySpace?
Uh, no, I never used MySpace.
Were you on Facebook?
I was on Facebook, like, I think my sophomore year of college is when I started that.
I didn't start till 2008 because community college, you weren't allowed to have a Facebook until that year.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. So
So
I guess Facebook was my first. Mhm.
So much like you, a lot of my business skills developed probably over the fact that I wasn't getting the best opportunities and I was stuck in retail, for a different reason. So what you're seeing now, in addition to just sitting here with me, is the fact that I've had to do a lot more personal development than I ever wanted to. Even though I cringed when I first heard the word, I'm like, what the heck's the difference between personal and professional development? And now that
Mhm.
I've had to do more of it just to run a business, I can kind of understand it. But then when you talk about networking, when I finally had to start doing it for a different reason, which wasn't looking for work, then I finally realized exactly what it is. You go a lot of time unpaid basically doing it, but there's a reason for it because you run across different people. And I was actually impressed to come across you. Now, if you don't mind me asking, did you get married in your earlier 20s since you had mentioned it?
We did not. When did I can't remember how old I was when we actually got married. When
It
we
was
got
after college, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we were together for maybe over 10 years before we got legally married. So we started a business only 4 months after meeting and like just went right into a whole life together and it was amazing.
And I'm guessing no kids,
No
considering
kids.
most of our peers between you and me, I ran into several people we went to school with over the years. Even Matt Bocklet just got married 2 to 3 years ago, and
Aw,
he
haven't
has
heard that
kids.
name in so long.
You
Yeah.
what?
I said I haven't heard that name in so long.
Yeah, I know. That's been one of the few people, along with John Carosa, that I've kept in contact with, mostly through Ricky Bolander over the years.
Mhm.
Only because, depending on who your circle of friends was, you probably stayed in contact with them. I mean, I kept up on some of the people we've graduated with, but I've lost touch with a lot of people in our own grade. So when I saw you on LinkedIn, I was pretty impressed because I remember when I was beginning to use LinkedIn, I saw you a few times, I just didn't see you as more active till now.
Yeah, well, I was a lot more active like over the summer, and now I'm going back and forth about it, but
Oh,
yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, LinkedIn's not bad, but even I've lowered my posting by a day. So basically, the mission with this podcast
Mm,
is to educate people on autism and eventually go into selling consulting services. I've actually sketched this out, but the consulting services would basically fund the media end of it. I've actually refined a lot of my digital skills and even gotten better with managing multiple different social media platforms because I feel like, especially you and me, we were like the social media generation.
mm,
We were the early adopters with it.
mm.
So now that you're in Austin, describe to us a little more about what your new business is.
For many, many years, I've supported people through coaching and facilitating in a number of things around transformation. So if someone, for example, like is an entrepreneur and they are coming against different patterns, right, over and over again, maybe it's patterns around money or relationships within their business, I have the ability to really support them on a deeper level to be able to make real impact in their lives. Um, because typically when we're, facing stagnancy in life or a lot of challenges, like there's something within us that we need to look at. And so I have a lot of different tools and things that I've learned over the years that I bring into the work that I do. But yeah, so I work with people who are entrepreneurs and who are not, who are just wanting to know themselves on a deeper level, to, yeah,
What
create
kind of
some.
tools do you what kind of tools do you say you use with them?
Well, I use strategic coaching for sure, but I have a lot of the work and the things that I've studied have been body based. So I help people learn how to listen to their bodies, right, which is the ultimate truth teller that we all have. And so I use breath work. I use something called embodiment work, which is a practice that helps you move from your head into your body, right? Most of us are living kind of like from the neck up. We're like making decisions fully from the mind. And when you start to learn how to bring your energy and your focus more into the body, you can make more grounded decisions and really start to hear and understand your own truth. So that might sound really vague, but I basically help people learn how to listen to themselves and live life
No, it
fully.
doesn't sound vague because interestingly enough, I did a different version of this. I just completed the Intro to Data Science and Machine Learning course, which was very intensive for 5 months. But I think where I differ from your explanation is I started to understand my past, my present, and what I want to do in the future by looking at it through data points.
Mhm. Awesome.
So I just went into a strategic new podcast concept with a mentor of mine up in Canada, and we're going to be up in Toronto, Canada, and we're going to be launching something probably a little later this year. I may ask you to come back if you're available as well to meet him, but back in 2021, he and I did a bigger creators content posting challenge. He's in the commercial real estate sector, and we've been very close friends ever since. In fact, last year he and I have a mutual friend who was living in Houston for a little while, went back up to Chicago with her husband, and they own duplexes, a series of multifamily homes, and she's a property manager. We, my mentor and I were interacting in her weekly real estate investors call. So from there, we just decided because we're both kind of, between the work and entrepreneur phase in our life, we decided to start building something together where I might be doing what's also considered accountability coach, accountability partner for someone. He told
Cool.
me from the perspective of a full stack web developer who thinks in systems, this would be good for you because what you can do is you sell this as a service. You do it for executives, you can do it, and then you can charge for it. You can do it for entrepreneurs, you can do it for pretty much everyone. You bring them on a call, you ask them what their goals are, you meet each week on Zoom, and then discuss what your wins for the week are.
Nice.
And the way
Great.
he framed it to me after taking the data science class, I'm like, this could actually work because most people don't want to admit out loud that they need accountability. In fact, one of the biggest things that paused me from when we graduated John Jay to 2021, no, to January 2022, when I finally did a podcast. Back when you and I were just coming out of school, if you wanted to do something like this, the technology wasn't as evolved yet to the point where now I have Zoom and I pay for a license. Before that, you needed a camera, you needed Final Cut Pro, you needed, whatever the or Adobe Premiere. You also needed, and you remember this, you remember all the early stage technology we grew up on. It was a lot harder. Look at how much better technology is now, where all you have to do is pay for a Zoom license, an editing program. Now you have AI tools that can help, manipulate a clip, DaVinci Resolve as an example, and then you can post it to social media like that.
Yeah.
So it would have been more expensive to do something like this back at the end of the 2000s. Today, it's actually sadly a lot cheaper to, be starting businesses, which is why more people like you and I with access to the internet were starting businesses.
Mhm. Yeah. No, it's so easy to create a website, to,
Or
list
pay a
product
developer.
online, or you don't really need, yeah, you can do everything yourself, which is really awesome.
And it's funny because, on Instagram, those nostalgia pages among our peers have become oh so popular. And it's, they're like, would you want to come back to live in the 1990s? I'm like, no, because I like today where we have all this technology and I'm actually doing something with my life that's separate from just working a 9 to 5 like everybody else.
Yeah, totally. Although I think it would be nice to go back to not having cell phones sometimes.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I agree. Here's the thing. I'm 50-50 on the phones. It's not so much the cell phones, because I think you'll find this interesting. I have a hypothesis about people. Okay, I'm going to use our peers, for example, who we grew up with.
Okay.
Before the cell phones, and Ricky said this to me, even though I think he had some logic behind it. He said to me, your cell phone takes up most of your time that you don't find certain things that I say funny anymore. I'm like, in my head, no, let's take the cell phones away. I never thought you were particularly funny with most things to begin with, and we have less in common. We have some things in common now as adults, but, you know, it's not the cell phone. Let's take the cell phones away from people. We still have a lot of the same problems we grew up with that I think no one wanted to discuss back then. Would you agree or disagree?
Well, what problems are you talking about?
For me, a lot of our peers used to pick on me a lot
Hmm.
when we were growing up. So I feel like at the very least with the cell phone kind of provided an escape for me sometimes, especially for things like going on public transportation. I do miss the in-person, being in person with most people, and I still try to do that, to this day. But as I've gotten older, I've also realized that if if it's important enough, they'll call.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's important enough, they'll contact me by phone and say, "Hey, you want to come spend some time with us or something like that." You don't need Without the cell phone, I think we had an idea of who we could spend time with when they would say, "Hey, we'll come pick you up around so and so time."
Hmm. Yeah.
I think what you're noticing when you say, I would like to go back to not having the cell phone, and I think we're forgetting something interesting. Humans are still humans. Without the cell phones, you still see some of the same things you may or may not have liked about them.
Yes, I think that the cell phones have made us very distracted. I think that we have our ability to focus just as people is has declined just because we are constantly inundated with messages and notifications on our phones. And then a lot of times when we are with people, we have lost the skill to actually like connect with someone and really listen to them and be present with them because our brains have now been so um like wired to like be constantly looking and checking and also being distracted. And so I think that a little bit of numbing is okay, but I think that a lot of people are numbing too much by using the phone and to avoid challenging conversations, real connection with people, etc.
So that I 100% agree with because for years with them, I'd wanted to have the conversation with them about what autism actually was because they all thought it meant I was mentally retarded. And
Hmm.
what I honestly would say to them if they're going to view this now, no. All it meant was I needed certain accommodations in school. When you go to the real world, all it basically means is the IEP takes on a different form in the real world. It's just asking for accommodations. Unfortunately, a lot of these Fortune 500 companies don't want to work with things like that because they think it's expensive. When in all reality, you're spending probably up to $500 just to accommodate an employee so he succeeds. With an IEP, that's probably not as much as you having to replace Johnny so and so every 2 to 3 months because he doesn't want to stay at your company for whatever salary you just offered him.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I also would say I think the cell phones probably became a mask for many people were not challenged to understand their friends. So I think what you're actually saying is the cell phone, you probably feel gives them an easy way to ignore, whatever reality has happened in your life.
Yeah.
But before the phone, how would you and I explain to people we grew up with who came from families where mom and dad stayed together what a divorce was? Do you think they would have been willing to have that conversation back then? Because among my peer group of friends who were all athletes, they didn't want to have those conversations.
Hmm. I mean, I also think that some of this just comes from maturing, like we were young and we didn't have, we probably didn't even fully understand divorce and the implications of it ourselves, and so it's really hard to explain something to someone else that you don't fully, that you haven't processed yourself. And I know when I was young, yes, I knew my parents were divorced. I knew that it was really hard and messy, but I didn't understand, how that impacted me. And I hadn't processed, the sadness or, how hard it was that I did later. And so it's like now that I'm an adult, like I better understand it. So I don't know if I would have had the ability to do that as a kid, just because you're young.
My girlfriend got married at 20 to someone older than her, and she has a son who's about to be 18 years old this summer, finishing up high school. She said to me, one thing that I think you didn't realize that you did when you were much younger, which is why, I'm your first probable relationship now, is you did something that was called manifesting. So if you were not understanding of yourself back then and you're saying you were upset that you never got married, it was probably because something of you internalized where basically you weren't ready for it yet. So if you do that from a young age and you tell yourself that, that means it may or may not happen.
Yeah.
And you and I probably didn't really necessarily understand manifesting fully, I think, until our 30s.
Yeah, I started studying manifestation when I was, yeah, 33 or 34.
My mid 30s was finally the point where I started maturing a lot more to kind of who I am today. I mean, I shaved this morning and I already have, some of the grays coming in, but not as bad because I think we're like the first generation who still looks young for 40-year-olds, which is very interesting because when our parents were this age, their grays were already coming in.
True. Yeah.
So it's interesting that you and I probably have found a lot of the stuff that we agree with. I mean, I miss the 90s and the 2000s for different reasons because there was less responsibility. But if you asked me to, do I want to live back then? No, I'm happy with I'm happy with, what I have today, even though the apartment came to me because of many years of not good wages. However, I'm happy that, affordable housing still exists in some areas,
Yeah.
even in one of the much more pricier sections of the country.
Definitely.
So, among the big reasons you chose to move to Austin, what was among the biggest reason?
I found I have a lot of friends here, and it's just really easy to spend time with people. That's really it. Anytime I'm here, I'm always like invited to things, and there's lots of events happening. And even though I have some really great friends in LA, I think because it's such a sprawled out city, it's just like harder to hang out with people. And so I just wanted to be closer to community.
Yeah, I can understand that. Los Angeles, I've never actually been there. You lived there for some time.
Hmm.
And you could probably tell me I probably wouldn't have liked Los Angeles, even though my co-founder on my media company, Aaron Catter, moved out there with his wife and children because he's freelance film producing and editing. Me
Hmm.
and him are me and him are now, still talking, not as frequently, but we still text and talk to one another. We have conversations since we're business partners now. And he said one of the nicest things to me in these last 2 to 3 years, which is probably something you picked up on with my posting. He said to me, "You've made me proud because you've had to do a lot of uncomfortable growth from when you left John Jay to where you are right now."
Hmm.
And especially in the last 2 to 3 years, where I've had to deal with, in the last 4 years, I've had to deal with two unemployments,
Hmm.
which is
Hard.
not fun. I didn't expect to have to rebuild my life two different times. The first time, COVID. The second time, not by my choice last year. That was because Optum did downsizing.
Hmm. Oh, I'm sorry. That's really hard.
You don't have to apologize for them. It ended up being their loss, even though they seem to think all this AI technology is magically going to make is actually going to make the old Caramount Medical's phone lines better. It's not.
Uh-huh.
That was every patient's top complaint, which I can understand. You can't fix a phone system.
Mm.
But aside from that, the company, I got 4 years of experience out of them, but it also taught me something along the way as I'm podcasting, and it got me a lot more technical. It taught me ability to manage this project to more what it is today, and, being able to speak in uncomfortable situations, be able to fully run a Zoom like this by myself from a technology standpoint, be in multiple applications. Data science just kind of polished everything up from last year to now. And now I'm at a stage where the only thing that I need besides a couple services that can start to make some money is money to finally build the business. That'll come, hopefully this year. So cross your fingers for me because I think this year is probably going to be a much better year for me personally, professionally, emotionally, because now I have somebody who, is in my life who's only 5 years younger than me and is there to stabilize me.
Mm. That's so beautiful. Yeah, I'm totally
Something that
rooting for you this year.
unfortunately, I think among our peers, this is just between you and me. I was surprised that you told me that even you went through a divorce because that was not something I was aware of when we were in school together. But I'm happy that you told me that
Mm.
because at least now as adults, we can stay in the other's life now. We can check in with each other, throughout the year through Zoom now because I pay for the Zoom license and, stuff like that and just kind of keep tabs on the other now that I have an easier way through LinkedIn to keep tabs on you.
Totally. Yeah. I'm so happy to be reconnected.
Yeah, same here. So I'm thinking at some point, if not this year, when things are finally stable money-wise, I think I'm going to make a trip out to Austin because I also have another friend who's a career coach and works for a university out there, and she's married with two kids. Her name is Diane. She lives in Austin also. Since I want to meet her offline, it would actually be an excuse to also, meet up with you down there. I think I'm going to make a trip back to Austin. I did like the barbecue, by the way.
Oh, yeah. The barbecue.
That's probably one of the hidden good parts about Austin, Texas.
Totally.
So yeah. All right. I appreciate you stopping by today. We're going to end on this note. Besides LinkedIn, do you have your own website where people can find you?
I do have a website. It's samanthaabrams.com. And my Instagram handle is Samantha Abrams. Um, I've been in a little bit of a pause with posting on social media and things, but
And
yeah.
that's completely okay because honestly, with all this technology, where you and I are also finding there needs to be a fine line. This is my website, by the way.
Oh, great.
So, if you know anyone down there and, they want an eventual accountability coach, just, refer them to my website and my LinkedIn. I will leave that there for you, and then I'll just give you the rest of my links in email.
Great.
So it was actually great catching up. And now that you've come through the show, the first time around, we can do more collaborations like this and let's stay in touch. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And
Oh, yeah, no. And I'm very happy that we were able to come back in contact together as well. This was actually great to finally come back to somebody who I went to high school with, from my own grade.
yeah, totally. No, and I'm really proud of what the work that you're doing, and I'm really excited for what's ahead for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All
Yeah.
right. So thank you for stopping by, and we'll see you
Okay.
guys at the next one.
Okay. Bye, Ben.
Bye. Hold on. Where is my, nope. And